So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a short span of time. Now, needless to say this, you have to revise this lecture just after watching it, because if you just watch this lecture, these current affairs that we have just covered would quickly skip your memory. Therefore, if you really want to retain them in your memory, solidify them in your memory, then you have to revise them from the notes provided by us on our Telegram channel. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section just below this video. So make sure you revise current affairs from the notes after every lecture. Okay? Do that. It will really help you in your examination. Alright then. Enough of the introduction. Let's straight away jump into the lecture. But first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. So let's begin. Okay. So daily current affairs, 3rd of December, Wednesday, and here is the topics list. Number 1 on this list is UN Sustainable Transportation Push. Basically, UN is promoting rail over road transport because it thinks that rail transport is better in terms of sustainable transport. Okay, less carbon emissions basically. So we will talk about this UN initiative and the report published by it. Then, topic number 2 is Cyclone Ditwah. We all know that this cyclone has caused so much devastation in Sri Lanka. Now, the thing is that this cyclone is quite unusual because it was formed south of Sri Lanka, where cyclones do not generally form. Okay, so this is a weird phenomena and it has caused so much destruction. So why? What are the geographical factors responsible for this? We'll talk about this. Then, topic number 3 is, well, again related to Sanchar Saathi app, which has come in huge controversy. Okay, so what sort of legal and constitutional provisions it violates, whatever the government order was with respect to Sanchar Saathi. We'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about India's defense preparedness. Okay. India is soon to get its 3rd nuclear submarine. India almost got its 3rd nuclear submarine. Okay. INS Aridaman. So we will talk why nuclear submarines are important for India's armory and how are nuclear submarines superior to conventional diesel electric submarines. Okay. So this is the 4th topic. So topic number 1 is related to environment and IR because we are talking about UN. Then topic number 2 is clear-cut related to geography. Topic number 3 is related to polity portion of your UPSC syllabus because we are going to talk about constitutional test and rights, right to privacy. And topic number 4 is clear-cut related to science and technology portion of your UPSC syllabus because defense technology is part of science and technology. Okay, so these are the 4 topics we shall zero in our attention on. So let's start discussing them one by one, starting with topic number 1, and that is UN's Sustainable Transportation Push. Now look, recently United Nations launched UN Decade for Sustainable Transport. Okay, UN Decade for Sustainable Transport, which will begin next year, 2026. And because it's a decade, it will go on till 2035. In this span of 10 years, well, United Nations is going to push for sustainable transport. Now, what do you mean by sustainable transport? Well, very simple. Transportation sector is also a huge emitter of greenhouse gases. Now, we want to shift towards sustainable transport. Okay, that means electric cars. That means preferring railways over road transport, trucks, railways over trucks. Okay. Now, recently under this Decade for Sustainable Transport, United Nations published a report. And in that report, they talked about rail networks, how rail networks are expanding, how rail networks are contributing towards sustainable transportation. Okay, so this particular topic would focus mainly on how railways and expansion in railway networks can boost all countries' attempt to achieve sustainable development goals. You all know about sustainable development goals, which every country has to achieve by 2030. How rail transportation can help achieve these countries achieve these sustainable development goals by 2030. Basically, that's the idea of this report. Okay, so let's talk about all these things. We'll cover all these things. Okay, so let's begin. So UN Sustainable Transportation Push. So what was in the news? First, let's talk about that. So 2024 Global Rail Sustainability Report. Okay, so this is the report released by International Union of Railways, which is called UIC, emphasizes railways' role in UN's Decade of Sustainable Transport. Okay, so basically International Union of Railways says that railway will contribute towards the goals of this UN's Decade of Sustainable Transport. Okay, we'll talk about this UN's Decade, but first let's talk about railways. Okay, The report highlighted rail's low external costs, and efficiency in emissions and land use. It requires little land, it emits fewer carbon or greenhouse gases, and transports goods and passengers in bulk. Okay, it's a superior way of transportation provided you are doing two things. First of all, you are transporting passengers or goods in bulk. Railways is the best form of transportation for bulk goods, bulk people. Okay, so this is advantage number one. Always prefer rail if you want to transport goods in bulk. And number two, long distance. Railways is the best for long distance transport, way superior than trucks, roads. Okay, so these are the two advantages. I mean, in these two areas, railways supports you. Okay, it is better than every other alternative. Clear? If you're talking about land transport, for bulk goods and long distance transport, railways is the best. And that's what this International Union of Railways says. Clear? Now, in their report, they have talked about different regions of the world and how they have done when it comes to railway expansion. As per the report, the details are given in your notes. So just go through that. Okay, we are not discussing the key highlights with respect to different regions, Asia, Pacific, Africa, Latin America, North America. We're not talking about that in the lecture, but details are given in your notes. But basically, they have talked about different regions and how they are doing with respect to rail expansions. Basically, Asia Pacific does the best, okay, or has performed the best when it comes to railway investments and railway expansion. This is not important information. What is important is how railways will help you achieve your sustainable development goals. Okay, now let's focus on this. So railways offer three advantages when it comes to sustainable transportation. Okay, number one, rail emits only 1% of transport emissions despite 7% of passenger and 6% of freight transport, with private car costs 17 times higher per kilometer than high-speed rail. So if people are traveling by rail for long distances, well, they'll be spending 17 times less. So there is cost advantage, there is greenhouse gas emissions advantage. Okay. Then number two, report covers 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. So 8 of the 17, so there are 17 Sustainable Development Goals. 8 of those goals can be achieved if you are focusing on railways. What are those 8 goals? Some examples are clean energy because it emits lesser greenhouse gases, climate action. India advances via 100% electrification, hydrogen trains and scrap management. Okay, so India is doing these experiments in its railways, so India is further advancing its sustainable development goals. You understand the point? Europe cut carbon emissions by 58% since 2005. Priorities include high speed, night rail, low carbon fuels for net zero emissions because Europe is moving towards net zero emissions, carbon emissions. So railways is helping in that area. Europe is finding railways useful. Okay, so railways are better than road transport. Road transport can become sustainable if every car, every truck becomes electric vehicle. And plus the electricity used in these electric vehicles is also generated through renewable energy. Until that happens, railways is far more sustainable than road transport. Simple. And well, road transport also also causes a lot of air pollution as well. So this is the thing. Okay. Now, this is as per the report of International Union of Railways. Now let's talk about International Union of Railways. What is this organization? Questions, MCQs can be asked from this as well. Okay. So International Union of Railways was founded on 17th October 1922 in Paris, France to standardize railway practices amid post-World War I border changes and incompatible networks. So basically this organization was formed so that railway networks of different countries become compatible. Okay, we have similar standards, similar railway lines, similar trains, standardized trains, so that one train can move from one country to another. You understand? Similar things. It is headquartered in Paris. UIC now has 223 members. Its members are basically railway organizations that manage rail networks. Okay, 223 members from over 100 countries, managing about 1 million kilometers of railway, 7 million personnel. UIC promotes rail transport worldwide, focusing on interoperability. Indian trains can also run on Chinese tracks. So we need standardized stuff. So this is there. But its major task is sustainability and innovation to address mobility challenges and climate change. It is also focusing a lot on sustainable transportation. Okay. Now, one more key piece of information that is important for you, and that is UN Decade for Sustainable Transportation. Okay, So this UN Decade for Sustainable Transformation is a newly declared UN initiative aimed at transforming global transport systems so as to achieve SDGs, climate goals, resilient infrastructure. Okay, it was launched by UN General Assembly. Okay, and its detailed plan is being prepared by UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, regional commissions, and stakeholders. All right. It aims to accelerate shift to sustainable, inclusive, safe transport. And if railways are developed properly, it will achieve so many sustainable development goals. Okay, so many sustainable development goals like SDG 9, infrastructure development, SDG 11, better cities, urban planning, climate change, SDG 13, oceans. Because again, if you emit less carbon emissions, oceans are also not going to get that warm. So many sustainable development goals are also getting achieved through railways. Okay, that's about it. That's all you need to know. Now let's quickly shift our focus to next news item, and that is Cyclone Ditwah. Now, cyclones in Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal is not unusual. But cyclones develop in Bay of Bengal. Cyclones rarely develop south of Sri Lanka. But this particular cyclone developed in south of Sri Lanka and caused like so much devastation in Sri Lanka because of certain key geographical factors. It caused most of the destruction in Sri Lanka only. Yes, some rainfall or storms did occur in Tamil Nadu as well, eastern coast of Tamil Nadu, but most of the destruction was in Sri Lanka. Now, why? What weird, I repeat, what weird geographical factors were there because of which Cyclone Ditwah was able to cause so much destruction in Sri Lanka? Okay, so let's investigate all of that because it is important information for your geography portion. Okay, questions related to this, geography related MCQs can be linked to this topic. So pay close attention. Okay, so Cyclone Ditwah. So what was in the news? So classified as cyclonic storm, second weakest tropical cyclone, second weakest category. With winds 60 to 90 kilometers, Cyclone Ditwah caused extensive damage in Sri Lanka, including hundreds of deaths, landslides, flooding, inundation due to prolonged heavy rainfall. Continuous heavy rainfall for so many days and its slow movement. We'll talk about this. Okay. So first, let's talk about Cyclone Ditwah. What was weird about it? Why is it the unusual cyclone? Ditwah developed in a rare cyclone-prone area south of Sri Lanka due to favorable conditions. Okay, Ditwah developed south of Sri Lanka. Well, cyclones don't develop south of Sri Lanka. Why? Well, number one reason. Well, let me tell you. Yeah, number one reason is because there is weak Coriolis force south of Sri Lanka. And tropical cyclones require Coriolis force for formation. Because there is weak Coriolis force because region south of Sri Lanka is closer to equator. So Coriolis force is weak over there. Because of that, well, the problem is that cyclones don't form. But this time around, it did. Weird phenomena, okay? Plus, the other thing is, whenever cyclone forms over the sea, when it approaches the land, and on the land, on the coast, it makes a landfall, causes some destruction, makes a landfall, and then dissipates just after landfall. We have discussed about this. But the problem with Cyclone Ditwah was, it didn't make landfall. It traveled parallel to the east coast. As you can see in this image, this is the cyclone, and it traveled parallelly to the east coast of Sri Lanka. So there was no landfall. Because there was no landfall, there was no break. And this cyclone caused destruction while traveling along the east coast. So continuous rainfall. Plus this cyclone was moving along the east coast very slowly. So rainfall was there for so many days. Plus another factor. This region of Sri Lanka, eastern coast, is hilly. With so much rainfall, there was so much landslides as well. And because of so much landslides, more destruction was caused. So few things aligned to make this cyclone devastating for Sri Lanka. Number one was it formed. It generally never forms. Number two, it didn't make landfall. It just traveled parallelly to eastern coast. And number three, eastern coast. This number three geographical factor. Eastern coast is hilly. So landslides were there. More destruction was caused. That is why this is an unusual cyclone. You understand my point? So unlike tropical cyclones that hit landmass directly and dissipate, Ditwah tracked parallel to Sri Lanka's coast, lingering for days and amplifying damage. Plus, its slow speed and proximity to land intensified impact like massive rain bands affecting hilly terrains, causing landslides. Okay, this was the reason. So you understand, we have covered tropical cyclones many times in our previous current affairs lectures, and we have discussed this, that Coriolis force is the essential factor for tropical cyclone formation this time around in this area. Maybe there was very little Coriolis force, but still the atmospheric wind circulation was such that this cyclone formed. Okay, makes sense? So this is the weird thing. These are some of the geographical factors that you need to remember because MCQs can be asked. So I hope you understood this topic. Okay, all right. So cyclones in Sri Lanka versus India. You see, cyclones mostly form in Bay of Bengal. Okay, and cyclones are more prone in Bay of Bengal than close to Sri Lanka or south of Sri Lanka. And that is why, because most cyclones form in Bay of Bengal, they hit eastern coast of India. Sri Lanka is not that prone to tropical cyclones. India is. And that is why India has developed infrastructure and India is very well prepared to deal with cyclones. Because Sri Lanka doesn't deal with cyclones that much. So they were ill prepared this time. They did not make preparations because they know that cyclones generally don't occur in our area. That was the difference between Sri Lanka and India. Favorable conditions near India. Sri Lanka between this latitude experiences fewer cyclones due to weak Coriolis forces. India faces stronger, more frequent ones from Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea. Cyclone management in India is superior. India has developed early warning systems as well. There were none in Sri Lanka, so they were ill prepared. Then number two, their infrastructure was also not prepared to handle cyclones because they rarely feel cyclones, okay? Or not that strong cyclones are faced by Sri Lanka. Plus, poor infrastructure and eastern coast of Sri Lanka being hilly, provoking landslides. That is why it caused way more destruction in Sri Lanka than it caused in India. Okay, so you understand this topic? That would be all. And now let's quickly shift our focus to third news item, and that is constitutional test of Sanchar Saathi. Now, we have discussed this news item in our previous lecture. Sanchar Saathi app is a cyber security app which will be installed in your phones. So whenever you are a victim of a cyber crime or cyber fraud, well, you can report that crime on that app. Now, Department of Telecommunication came out with an order that Sanchar Saathi app should be pre-installed in all the new phones, and the existing phones should update their software so as to accommodate Sanchar Saathi app, basically mandating Sanchar Saathi app in every phone. Now, privacy activists were not happy with this. First of all, Sanchar Saathi app, well, it basically collects a lot of your data. Your photos will be with Sanchar Saathi app. By that means government. Your call log, your WhatsApp history, your messages, everything would be, all this data will be collected by this Sanchar Saathi app. Clear? So number one. So privacy activists are saying that government might use this data for data surveillance, surveilling its own citizens. So this was one issue. Number two, well, government ordered that this app should be pre-installed and nobody can delete this app. So you are not taking user consent. India's data privacy law says that if you're collecting someone's personal data, you need to take their consent. But Sanchar Saathi app is not doing that. So these were the two big issues. It violated right to privacy, which is a fundamental right now, and allegations of data surveillance were there. Now, government has backtracked. Government has said that you can delete this app. All of this is happening. But nonetheless, it was a big issue. And constitutional questions related to right to privacy were surfacing. So we will investigate the constitutional issue. Okay, we won't talk about technical details about this app because we have already discussed this. We will only focus on how this app violates your fundamental right to privacy. What are the constitutional and legal issues related to that? Clear? So let's do this. So constitutional test for Sanchar Saathi, very short topic, okay? Department of Telecom issued a directive mandating pre-installation of Sanchar Saathi app on all mobile phones to enhance telecom cybersecurity and curb counterfeit devices. Okay. Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia clarified on December 2nd that the app is optional and deletable, creating ambiguity on user consent despite the written order's implications. So initially the government made it mandatory, okay, mandatory pre-installation, and said that it was necessary. And then government had to backtrack. Telecom Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia had to announce that no, it is not mandatory and all of that. So it is being said that the government backtracked. Well, that's because this order of telecom, DOT, Department of Telecom, basically violated right to privacy. And what is right to privacy, or how can you test whether a particular action of the government or whether a particular action of data collection by the government violates right to privacy or not? For that, a 3-step test has been given by Supreme Court. Okay, so let's talk about that constitutional test. The mandate faces scrutiny under K.S. Puttaswamy judgment. So remember this judgment. K.S. Puttaswamy judgment of the Supreme Court made right to privacy a fundamental right. So right to privacy became a fundamental right under this judgment, Puttaswamy judgment of Supreme Court in 2017. And Puttaswamy judgment also gave a 3-step test to check whether an action of the government is a violation of right to privacy or not. Now, what is that 3-step test, 3-fold test? Number 1 is legality, whether that action of the government is backed by law made by Parliament. This order of pre-installation of Sanchar Saathi app was not by a law made by Parliament. It was just a government order. It was a DOT order. So it violates test number 1. Then necessity, whether this action is necessary to do certain things. Now, government might say that cybersecurity is necessary. It's a necessity, and that's why we are giving this order of pre-installation. But there are safer alternatives available. So that is why it doesn't fulfill the necessity test also. Why? Because other options are also available through which government can provide cybersecurity rather than pre-installing this data collection giant called Sanchar Saathi in your phones. And number 3, proportionality. There should be rational nexus. There should be justification whether collecting phone numbers from your phones is basically protecting you from cyber frauds. Okay, so you have to prove whether the data you are collecting is collection for providing you security from cyber frauds. So that nexus was also not being proved by the government. So this was another thing. Clear? So it failed the 3-fold test. And maybe that is why, because the government thought that this would be challenged to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court will say that this app is a violation of right to privacy. That is why maybe the government backtracked. That's what many experts are saying. By the way, we have already discussed this, why this app can be used by the government for surveillance. Okay. Again, those same points are being mentioned, which were discussed in the previous lecture. So go through them from your notes. Okay. And now let's quickly shift our focus to last news item of the day, and that is 3rd nuclear submarine for India. Now, look, submarines are very important for any navy. Why? Because submarines travel deep underwater, and that is why they are undetectable. Sometimes you can even get into enemy territory and do all sort of surveillance, and the enemy is unable to detect you. It's very difficult to detect submarines. Now, there are 2 types of submarines. One are called normal conventional submarines, okay, diesel electric submarines. These diesel electric submarines use diesel electric engines. Now, diesel electric engines are those engines in which diesel is burned. Okay, now when you burn diesel, obviously you require oxygen, because oxygen is a supporter of combustion. You know this, right? Without oxygen in vacuum, you cannot light a fire. You need oxygen to burn anything. So this diesel electric submarine has to come up to the surface of the ocean from time to time to breathe air and then go downwards. So it has to come up from time to time. Okay. So if it is traveling in enemy territory, once it comes up, well, the enemy can detect this submarine. So it is a good submarine. It is cheaper to make, but this is one flaw. Then there is another category of submarines, and those are called nuclear submarines. How are nuclear submarines superior? Well, they don't run on diesel electric engines. They run on nuclear engines, which require nuclear fuel. And one submarine can carry nuclear fuel for up to 30 years. That means that submarine can stay underwater for 30 years. And it does not need to come up to the surface. For 30 years, it can travel underwater because it uses nuclear energy, no air required. So it can stay silent, remain undetected. Now, any navy which has nuclear submarines has better capability. Now, India had 2 nuclear submarines. I mean, many nuclear submarines, okay? But recently, India inducted another nuclear submarine, INS Aridhaman, okay? So we will talk about nuclear submarines, their superiority, types of nuclear submarines, different types of nuclear submarines. And we will also talk about overall naval preparedness of India. How is India's Navy prepared? Okay, so let's start. So third nuclear submarine for India. So yeah, so in the news, I'm so sorry about this heading. Yeah. So India is nearing the commissioning of the third nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine SSBN INS Aridaman, currently in the final trial stages. This addition strengthens India's sea-based nuclear deterrent by increasing operational Arihant class SSBNs. Okay. Now, first of all, I need to tell you that, well, you know why nuclear submarines are superior. Okay. We have discussed this, superior to diesel electric submarines. They carry highly enriched uranium fuel for up to 30 years, so can stay underwater, have higher speeds, and yes, they are technologically superior. That's why their cost is also high. Cost of maintenance is also high. Now, nuclear submarines are of three types. Okay. One are called SSN. These are nuclear powered submarines. Okay. They use nuclear fuel. Then an upgrade to SSN is SSBN. This is a nuclear powered submarine, but it can carry nuclear missiles also, which can be launched. Nuclear ballistic missile. This B is ballistic. So Aridhaman is SSBN. It is not only powered by nuclear fuel, it also can carry nuclear missiles. Okay, which can be launched. So India can launch its nuclear attack from air, from land, and from sea as well using this Aridhaman. And then there are SSGN. Same as SSBN, but instead of ballistic missiles, you have cruise missiles. Okay, so there are three types of nuclear submarines. Now, what sort of submarines does India have? So India has Arihant class submarines, SSBNs. Okay, INS Arihant is there, INS Aridhaman is there. It is clearly made by India only. Okay, then India has INS Chakra. This is imported from Russia. This is an SSN. Okay, then India is going to build its own SSN, not from Russia, its own. And then there is another superior quality SSBN that is under construction. So these two are under construction. This is there with India. This is also there with India. You understand? Okay. Now, what are the advantages of having SSBNs? Strategic advantage, very important. Nuclear submarines provide strategic advantages like second strike nuclear deterrence. What do you mean by second strike? If Pakistan or China attacks us with nuclear weapons, and in its first attack, they destroy all our missile launch pads in India, then we can attack their country from sea, because they won't be able to destroy our submarines because submarines are virtually undetectable. So this gives us a second strike, retaliatory strike capability. This is very important. Okay. Now, as far as India's naval preparedness is concerned, you know what kind of submarines we have. Okay. There is another very important naval asset, and that is called aircraft carriers. Okay. India has two aircraft carriers, INS Vikrant, INS Vikramaditya. And India wants three aircraft carriers. Why? One for Arabian Sea, one for Bay of Bengal, and one in reserve. Okay, we want three. So we are in the process of building third aircraft carrier. Plus, our naval preparedness is increasing. Our Navy is expanding its footprint. Earlier, we mostly operated in Indian Ocean. Now we are moving to the Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean. We are expanding our footprint. Okay, that is written in your notes. So go through this as well. But I hope you understood the difference between nuclear submarines and diesel electric and how nuclear submarines are superior. I hope you got that. And with that, we conclude today's session. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. But it will add more value if you revise this lecture from the notes. Okay, so please do not forget to do that. And I shall see you next time with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.